Hi everybody. Go ahead and get settled. We're seems like a good time to get something to drink, maybe a cookie, whatever it is you'd like to do to get set. We're going to start in about 10 minutes. everybody, welcome to StashBlaster Quilts. My name's Maria Spitalnik, and I'm here to help you sew more quilts more easily with a lot less stress. And today we're going to start with kind of an addendum to the last session. I always start with a tip of the week. Well, it's every 2 weeks really, but I start with a tip, usually an organizational tip. And we talked about the free table, either last time or the time before. And I showed some quilt kits that I picked up on the free table and some other stuff. And so I wanted to talk to you about a couple of other things that I've done from the free table, and then how I've treated them a little bit differently. So I'm going to switch cameras here. There it is. So this is my normal 2.5-inch blocks. I've cut all of these. They're all exactly the same size, and they are stored in a box that just says 2.5-inch blocks. Well, one time off of the free table, actually over the course of several times, I picked up these blocks. Now they're alternated like this because I've been sorting them to try to match them up, because these are not my blocks. These are blocks that I got from the free table. They're not fabrics I purchased. And let me turn these up. There we go. And they're not all perfect. Some of these are oversized, some of them are undersized. And so I washed and dried and pressed them, but instead of putting them in with my ones that I know are correct, these ones, I actually labeled it. It's actually upside down. I'm sorry. 2.5-inch blocks cut by someone else. Well, on my wall over here behind you, I have another drawer labeled hexagons cut by someone else, miscellaneous squares cut by someone else, and miscellaneous shapes cut by someone else. So why do I have these? Well, I have found that on a free table or somewhere else, you never know what you're going to get. Once upon a time, the hexagons was a kit that I picked up off of the free table. But when I got it home and I tested the hexagons, they're not correct. They're skewed. And so I couldn't just sew them together like I'd originally planned. So what do? Well, it used to be that I would have taken these blocks, these other person did blocks, and I would trim them down to the next size down and then put them in with my usual blocks. However, I decided to keep them in these drawers, at least for now, for when I had a project that I didn't need that precision to be there for one reason or another. So what have I been doing with these? Well, since they're 2.5, I told you that I had purchased one of those 1-inch hex paper punches. And so what I've been doing is, these are the hexes that I've done. These are all thread basted and ready to go. You can't really tell on that one. Maybe if I come up closer you can see the threads. Let me find another one that's a little better. I didn't think about that before I set up to do this. I'm sorry. Here we go. This is a good one. So you can see that I've got an orange thread that runs around here. That's how I basted this down. Nothing's been sewn yet, it's just been basted. And so I've done all of these, plus I still have all of these from what was in this drawer. So there's hundreds of them. Now, I could have spent the time to cut them down, but in this particular case, when you're doing hexagons, you put your paper, your EPP paper, English paper piecing, we've talked about that before, onto the square, and then you trim around. Well, if I can take, of course I didn't grab one of my papers, so there you go. So this is going to look a little weird, but if I take this square, and we're going to pretend that this is a paper, if I put that on there, there's actually plenty of space around, so you would just trim off the excess corners, and then you go ahead and thread baste it like I did this one. So you can see the paper in the middle and then the fabric going around. So rather than trimming these down in order to do something else, I'm going to have to trim them for the hexagons anyway. So why not just do it once? Now, could I be using 2.5-inch strips? Of course I could. Could I be using a mini charm pack? Sure. There's no reason you can't use other things. You could use charm squares and cut it into 4. There's tons of choices. But this was a situation where over time I had accumulated from the free table a bunch of squares. And like I said, some are undercut, some are overcut. However, when you look at my collection here of the pieces that I've done, I'm probably going to wind up with about 2 of these bins here worth of hexagons, 1 inch, that I didn't pay anything for, other than the price of the punch and the thread. You can't get better than that. You guys know at this point that I do not like to spend money that you don't have to spend. I want you to spend it intelligently. So this is one way that I did it. So here I've been thread basting these for, probably about a month, maybe 2 months, but probably less than 2 months to do all these ones that I've done. And this is a great thing to do at home, in front of the TV, you got your feet up in the recliner, you're just relaxing, because it's brainless. It really is. So I've been thread basting. Well, I took a class from Tina Craig from Seaside-Stitches. So if you go to her website, it's seaside-stitches.com. She teaches a different kind of English paper piecing. So let me show you. Let me move these things around a little bit. Okay. I'll be with you in just a second, I promise. I've got the one that I was working on. I took the class from her yesterday and had to be at a client's all day today, so I haven't had a chance to advance myself. But I will show you. Okay. You have to have 2. I only pulled one out of the box. Alright, let me get a couple here. Okay, so let's come over here to camera 3. Normally with English paper piecing, let me bring this down closer so you can see better. Oops. This got moved on me, and so I'm trying to make it work. There we go. I am going to get this. Someday this is going to be perfect and you won't know who it is you're looking at anymore. Okay, so you take 2 pieces. They're basted. You're going to put them together. What you normally do is you put them right sides together, like this, folded, and then you take little tiny whip stitches across the intersection here. And that's what holds the pieces together, so that you can then open it up later, and then you'll put the next piece on, etc. So one of the problems with this is if you take too big a bite, you can see the stitches in here. Now, normally the stitches are teeny weeny. If you are thread matching, you'll never even notice them unless you're really looking. But this flat back method that Tina was teaching, it's amazing in how much easier it is. So let's come back here to camera 3. So this is my piece of work currently in action. Now, this puckering has nothing to do with the stitching that I did. It's because of how it was in my box. This was laying completely flat, and a quick press will deal with that. But if I can get this where you can see, there we go. You can't see any of my stitches here. Okay? And what you do is you use tape. Now this could be medical tape, or you know me and my painter's tape, right? So when you stitch this, you stitch it in such a way that the stitches are all hiding on the back side. So here's my stitches here. Now this is a very thin thread, and you can see them though. Okay, here we go. So you can see my stitches here, right? And you can see that there's some here. But they're more on the back side. So it's a much cleaner method. And the nice thing is when you're doing the other version, you're constantly folding over the pieces that you've already done and putting a lot of stress on them in order to get these other pieces put in. Yes, the first one's easy. So they always say you do, on the hexagon, you do all the way around the hexagon first. So then you have 6 of these hexagons that are not sewn this way. Okay? And then you sew up here and you try to go around this whole one. But you still wind up bending and twisting and folding, and even when you get to the point where you can start taking the papers out, you're still mangling things, and it tends to drift unless you're paying really close attention. So this new flat back method was great, and I think I'm going to switch. Something else that she does that's different, if you look here, you do not see any thread. She glue bastes. I was a little nervous about glue basting, to be honest with you. Number one, I'm a klutz. You all know that by now. And so I was a little nervous that the glue would start to get a little bit out of control. Granted, I only basted the 7 hexagons, the 6 green ones, and then the floral one here. But even after having done several of them, my fingers weren't super sticky, which is what I was afraid of, because then you wind up with glue everywhere. And it's a glue that washes out. So since this particular quilt will get washed, I'm not all that concerned about it. So I'm going to give it a shot. So I'm going to finish thread basting the ones that I had started. Remember, I was using the binder clips on those? So when I'm done with those, I'm going to do a bunch of these with the glue. And I'm going to start putting together those 3 different quilts that we talked about. And we'll see how it goes. So I just want to let you know, again, her name is Tina Craig, and her website is seaside-stitches.com. This is the same gal that I told you about the class that she taught about improvisational English paper piecing. And I did that quick little, not as good as her type demo, just to tell you what that was. But that's something that she does as a workshop, and you might want to consider that. So that's that. That's my thing about Tina. So moving on. But our tip for the day, was the storing things that are cut by somebody else until you're ready to actually do something with them. That was the main part of the tip. Then secondly, we're talking about Tina. So I'm going to kind of use today as a catch-up day, because there's a bunch of stuff that's going on that I thought I'd fill you in on. We're still going to finish by 8 o'clock, no problem. But I bought a bunch of stuff, and some things were a yes, and some things were a no, and some things were a yeah, we'll figure that out as we go. So I purchased a box of 144 pre-threaded bobbins, which I can't seem to get open, so I'm going to use my scissors. I mean, I've opened them already, but there's that little flap that goes into the slot that, you understand that. Okay, so the box was actually smaller than I thought it was going to be when I ordered them. But this is a nice little box of them. And I said, this is great. I got them in white and I got them in black. They also come in gray. I opened the white box and I went to, I put it in my bobbin, worked fine. And then I wanted to put it on the top of my machine and it didn't fit. The hole is just a smidge too narrow. So why would I be putting them in the top? Unless you've seen the older videos. If I am doing my StashBlaster Quilts for charity, I put a bobbin in the top and one in the bobbin case, because I can see the one on the top, I can see how much thread is left. And because the thread on the top has to go all the way through my machine, I have a much better idea how much I have left, and I don't wind up running out on my bobbin when I'm sewing a 15-yard piece of fabric. So for me, it just makes a lot of sense to do that, but I found I can't do that with these. The same thing happened with some clear empty bobbins that I purchased. So I've had some negative feelings about this stuff. Now, the empty ones I bought because I have a whole bunch of those little, you get a kit of the little baby spindles. They're like maybe an inch tall of fabric. Here, you can see it against there. They're about that big. And they're about a half a bobbin's worth. And so I got these clear, the clear bobbins, because those are what work on my machine. And my plan had been to spin up all these half sizes because I have a lot of good ways to store regular bobbins, and those little tiny spools are just not worth it to me. So I bought a couple hundred of those, the clear bobbins, and they're also too small. Now, there's an easy fix. They go on one way but not the other way. So I have a round hasp, and so what I'm going to do is, it's narrower than a pencil. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the bobbin. Hold on, let me get one of these out again. Okay. I'm going to take the bobbin like this. Hold on, let's see where you can see it. Okay, it's always upside down and backwards on these things. Okay, and then I'm going to take the hasp, which this is not. Okay, but then what I can do is I can put it in the bobbin and just give it a couple of passes, just enough to take down those little burrs that are on the inside that are preventing this from going onto my machine. So they will be usable, but they shouldn't be extra work. So I was a little bit disappointed. Technically, I could have returned them. I had, however, gotten in the spirit and had already unpacked them and had a whole bunch of other stuff set up, and I'd put my empties into cases, and it's just not worth going through and undoing it all. So I'm going to just go ahead and do this as a summertime type project outside, where I can just spin those little the hasp in there, get them all so that they go through just fine, and move on. So those were both a couple of disappointments. But I will say these worked like a dream in my bobbin case. So if you do a lot of sewing using white or black in your bobbin, or gray, the spindle size in the middle doesn't matter. So these things worked out really well, and they were relatively cheap. Something else that I got was a few of these. I love my bobbin rings, as you know, and so I got all different colors. These two reds are a little too close in color, so I'm not sure what I'm going to do about that. But my plan is that I'm going to have a ring per project. So I'll have my regular rings, because you know I'm always traveling with them. But I'll be able to put the spun bobbins for the project that I'm working on in a zip type bag and put it in the project bag or basket. And then that way it's all together. I have everything I need. So I have the thread, I have the bobbins, I have the needles, I have everything all in one spot. Now, you know I'm not a huge fan of buying duplicates of things, but in this particular case for me, since I have a lot less time to sew than I'd like, it's just nicer to have everything all in one spot. So I do keep extra sewing machine needles right here on my little dresser next to my sewing machine, but my threads are going to be by project. So I don't have to think about it. And I've got plenty of these rings now, as you saw, and these are just the new ones. And so I'll be able to go ahead and, and just keep everything corralled that way. And then when the project is done, and I don't have to keep those threads separated anymore, they'll get put in with the regular ones. Okay. Now, what am I doing with the regular ones now? Yes, this was a bobbin palooza for me. Oh, my chapstick came out. There we go. All right. So you can't see down there. Okay. So I bought these cases. Oh, you can't see, the thread's too light. Here we go. Okay. And let's change cameras. I know I'm being a little bit weird here. I'm sorry. So I bought these cases, and what I like about them is now I'm sorting the bobbins by color. Now in this particular case, it's hard to tell here, but these are all browns and taupey colors, golds. This one is more my lighter creams. These are all lighter in color than, let's say, a grocery bag. And these are all either golden browns or darker. One of the reasons for that is just space. So I do have another one here. These are yellows. So I can go ahead and just pull the color group that I'm looking at when I'm trying to match up, if I'm attempting to match my thread to my project. A lot of times I don't bother, but in this particular case I wanted that ability. And partially the reason for that was that I was going to start sewing all those hexagons together, and you need the matching threads to make them less visible. So it's kind of a, I may have gone out of my way and prepped for something that I'm not going to need. We're going to see how this flat back thing works. But even so, it never hurts to have things faster and more easily able to be recognized and to find what you're looking for. So, by the way, I don't know if you've noticed, the camera angle has changed. I'm trying to get used to this, which is why the name is over here now, mail@StashBlasterQuilts.com. And then this way my hands are more visible. So when I'm trying to describe something, it's not happening down here where the frame is up here. So, so hopefully this is going to be better. And you're going to see just how twitchy I can be. But I do tend to talk with my hands. So that's the new bobbin stuff. But the flatback is going to have me using a lot more of this painter's tape. So this probably isn't going to last me a year now, but that's okay. It's cheap, and if it can save me a lot of hassle and I don't have to match my threads as much, then that makes this an even more portable project than I thought. So, okay. Next, another class that I took was during our quilt camp. Now, my guild in Springfield, I belong to Quilters Unlimited in Centerville and in Springfield. We have, I think, 11 chapters in my guild. And so, I hope this is the last year we're doing this on Zoom. Normally what we do is 3 days where we meet at the firehouse where we normally meet. And we're there all day as a group. So people take individual projects that they're working on. It's kind of like a retreat, but you have to take your machine home every day. But that's because we have, since it's a fire hall, there's always bingo. So the bingo ladies, you know, we can't have with our machines there. But you bring your machine, and we sew all day, we order in food, people bring snacks. And it's really nice because it's not really expensive. Most of the retreats that our groups go on are at a hotel or something like that, where you're paying for the working space, then you need to rent a room and all of that stuff, and that can get very expensive. So the fire hall, I think, is $50 a day, which comes to maybe as much as $2 a person, and then of course there's food. So it's only for our chapter. And so we go for the 3 days. And then we also have members of the chapter who will teach a little mini class. So how to put a flange on a quilt. Or I did one on wacky rulers. People gave me rulers to play with for a month. And because they bought them and they couldn't remember how to use them, or the instructions didn't make sense. And I'm a tool girl. So I love all this really cool tools that we can play with in our hobby here. So I did that. I taught, for about 20 minutes on some of these strange rulers that people had. So that's nice. And people put together little projects. So sometimes it's a rope bowl, or this last time one of the people taught a jelly roll rug. How to make a jelly roll rug. So there's a whole bunch of stuff like that that people teach. And one of the members of the Springfield Guild does a lot of spiral quilting. And so a lot of people have asked her how to do it. And so she taught a class on spiral quilting. And so this was Sandra Israel. And so I'm going to show you my attempt. Now, admittedly, there are a couple of problems with this. Not with the technique, with the operator. Me. I'm the problem. All right, let me move this out of the way. Number one, these squares were already assembled. They were going to be the backing, not the backing, they were going to be part of the Scrappy Petals quilt that I was working on. And what you do is you start putting the flowers on, and then you want them to overlap the different quadrants. And so you sew the parts together, and then you fold the fabric back and pin it, and then you sew the quadrants together, because trying to do the petals in the middle would be really, really hard. So these are 2 of the 4 sections that I was going to be putting into this Scrappy Petals quilt. So that's a problem, in that not all of since that was a one-off, I really wasn't worried that much about the material. I knew I was going to be quilting it, but I didn't know how, so I wasn't paying attention to, was it going to be distracting with the quilting or things like that. So that's number 1. And number 2, my stepmom was here to visit, and so I normally keep the projects I'm working on and the quilts and stuff that I'm done with, and my teaching materials and all that stuff in the guest room, which is in the room behind you. And so since she was coming, we brought all of that into this room. So I couldn't get to my batting, my normal batting, and so all I could reach was this fluffy super bat. So new technique, not really paying attention to materials, and definitely the wrong batting does not make a good first example. However, so if I hold this up here, you can see it though. So the idea here is that you start in the middle here, and she gave us a template to get started, and then you just go around and around and around. So I think overall it was fine. The batting came to be a problem in that this isn't laying flat, which kind of drives me bonkers. I have this thing about my quilts being flat every step along the way. So I don't know. I'm going to go ahead and bind this anyway, and then I'm going to wash it and see if in the wash the batting relaxes more and lets it flatten out. I'm really hoping it does. This was going to be a charity quilt anyway. If it winds up being a charity dog quilt, that's fine too. This would certainly be warm for puppies or something like that, so it's not going to go to waste. But I thought the technique was kind of cool. And this is done by using a guide on your sewing machine foot. Well, my guide doesn't really fit the way it needed to go. So if my foot was here and the guide was here, it's supposed to be where you've got this little finger that comes down like this, that rests on the previous sewn line. Well, since it was backwards on mine, it was an inch off the fabric. And so I kept trying to tape it down to my walking foot so that I could then follow it. And it would just start to loosen up and start to lift, and I didn't always notice it. So some of these are not the same width, etc. But this was actually a lot of fun to do. And by putting the guide on the left side of your foot instead of the right where it normally goes, because normally it lies flat and then a tip comes up. Since you're reversing the order, the tip is down. And I think that's why it didn't work with my walking foot, because it did not like it being down. I even tried to tape like a quarter to it, and I just couldn't get enough weight in the time I had before the class was starting, and I was going to try this. So by using the guide on the left, you didn't have the problem of having this huge amount of quilting that you'd have to jam up under. In fact, the hardest part was the beginning, but then it got easier and easier and faster as you went around until the quilt ended, like here, right? And then there's just these little swoops that come off on the corner. And you can do multiple spirals on the same quilt, and just when they run into the other one, you stop. So this was kind of a cool thing to do. And so I had never thought that I was going to do this. I always have some sort of a weird plan for the quilt that I want to do. I've talked about putting Easter eggs into the quilt, that being a hidden thing, not the actual eggs. So this I thought was kind of an interesting technique, and one thing I liked was the fact that if you had this, there's no reason you couldn't add an Easter egg. Now this is just a thread end here, so we're going to ignore that. But you could put I love you in here, or the person's name. Instead of doing a label, you could write in the arc, either with quilting thread, or you could of course just marker it. But that would be kind of neat, I think. On the back it would be reversed, of course, which would be a little odd, but it'd be nice to see it. Just this thin little line of script that follows around on one corner. You could, since these are circular, depending on how you think about them, I was thinking that if you were thinking of them kind of like a plowed field, because there's some places where instead of plowing a field up and down like this, they plow it in a circle. You could put like a little tractor trailer. I mean, a little tractor, or cows, or chickens, or whatever you want. You could just kind of disperse them among the quilt if you wanted to. This is one of those things where, like, this is yellow, and I know you can't really tell that on camera, but if you did it in yellow thread, it wouldn't be noticed until you were up close and personal with it. So if your title is reminiscent of a farm, and then you've hidden little pictures, that could be kind of fun. So like I said, this was just a test, and it's going to be a charity quilt, so I wasn't all that worried about adding stuff to it. But I do think this is an interesting technique. So if you haven't tried spiral quilting, you might want to give it a shot. Sandra was saying that she has done them at least a queen, and I think she's done a king size on her domestic using this method and spray basting. So if you're not sure what to do, this certainly grabs some attention. You could do the multiple spirals on a big one if you wanted to, or one great big honkin' one, and if it goes with your theme, that's even better. So if you haven't tried this, this might be something that would be worth trying. Oh, my neighbors are out talking. If you can hear them, excuse me, if you hear either airplanes or my neighbors, today is the first day that we've had the windows open all day. It's been wonderful. I can't tell you how tired I am of having to be cold and wet and all that stuff out there. So I couldn't resist. So the window is open, the fan is going so that it's blowing the air through my house, and we can get some of that winter mustiness out of here. So I got an email, and someone was saying to me that I've talked about here that part of my goal is to reduce your stress as a quilter. And she was saying that she felt that I was not appreciating complex or difficult quilting. And I just want to say that's the furthest thing from the truth. But I could see where somebody might think that's what I meant. So I want to clarify that here. There's good stress and bad stress. Okay? Good stress is, I'm going to try something new. I'm a little nervous about it, but I'm going to give it a shot. That's going to give you a little bit of a rush. It's a little bit stressful. You get a little bit tense. That's fine. It's something you want to try, go for it. It's when people are so stressed that this isn't fun anymore. Either this particular quilt or quilting isn't fun anymore. During the class that we had, and it was yesterday on the English paper piecing, one of the attendees was getting very frustrated because this is a slow process. English paper piecing is not a fast activity. This is something that you do to slow down and relax. I have a machine that goes super fast, but you can't do EPP with it. This is something to relax. She didn't find it relaxing. So I don't think that it's for her, and that's fine. Not every technique is for every person. I can't do English paper piecing all day. It will drive me crazy. But on a regular quilting day, when I have them, which doesn't happen as much as I'd like right now, I'll do some machine sewing, and I'll do some cutting, and I'll do some pattern making, and I'll do some handwork. If I have an 8-hour day, I don't want to do the same thing for 8 hours, because you might as well hit me in the head with a brick. What I want to do is alternate things around, move things on, have multiple projects going. Now that's how I am. Some of you out there like to start a project and do that one project, finish it, bind it, label it, put a sleeve on it, the whole 9 yards, and then move on to the next project. I get bored too easy. I am not the kind of person who can do that. My husband will say that if I don't have enough stress in my life, I will manufacture it. I will find something to stress over. What I'm trying to do here is to make it so that you only have that good kind of stress, where you want to try something new. You want to go a little out of your comfort zone. However, you're not going to be so uncomfortable that you start disliking this particular activity. This is a hobby for most people. It's supposed to be relaxing. You're supposed to enjoy it. You can enjoy the challenge of it, but you should enjoy it. So when I'm talking stress, I'm only talking the bad stress. If you want to try something new, do it. If you want to... So, silly things that people do for fun. There is a thing called extreme ironing. Now, it's mostly men that do this, which I find particularly amusing. And they will have a cordless iron and an ironing board, and they'll be suspended off a cliff, or ironing while skydiving, or ironing underwater, which is just one of those things I thought was hysterical. And I guess you get style points and all this. It's just a weird thing. So they're having fun. Okay, it's a hobby for them. Go for it. If you want to do extreme quilting, go for it. At the lecture yesterday, one of the quilts that she showed was a temperature quilt, which I had completely forgotten about. I don't know that I want to do that, because I don't know that I want to track the temperature and create the chart and do all of that stuff. But, you know, it's kind of a cool thing. And she was doing that for her grandson's birthday. She's doing another one. She's done a whole bunch of these things. And if that's what you want to do it. There's lots of challenges out there that you can either create for yourself. There's quilting challenges that you can join. For example, Gnome Angel has the 100 blocks in 100 days. I think they're doing the same one again next year, which will be its 3rd year. So if you did some of them, then you can get caught up on the rest of them. But people do them, and they have all different settings for them. It's amazing to watch. So that's kind of a timed challenge, because the blocks are fairly simple for the most part. Or you can pick up something brand new, where maybe it's a Baltimore album challenge, and you have 1 month per block or something, which would be a lot of work. So you could have a technique challenge. Of course, if you belong to a guild, there may be guild challenges that are outside your comfort zone. I used to be very much everything is blue kind of a quilter. I only sewed with blue because blue was my favorite color. And I mean, actually purple was my favorite color, but blue was more readily available in more shades and more patterns and things like that. And so one of the very first challenges I did was the ugly fabric challenge. And the guild bought, I don't know how much, but they bought a whole bunch of fabric. And it was this one pattern that was really ugly. And they handed everybody, I think it was a 14 or 16 inch square. If you were going to participate in the challenge, you got that fabric. And you had to figure out a way to use it. And so I did the quilt Window on the World, Zuki's View. And Zuki was a dog that I had, and so there's the window frame, and there's, you know, clouds made out of lace, and there's mountains and all that stuff. And then there's a flower box, which was what this fabric went into, because it was a brown fabric with multicolored thin stripes. It looked kind of like grass, except that they were neon colors. And then I also took some of that fabric and I said, I got to do something else with it, because just using it as dirt isn't good enough. So what I did was I made petals, and then I made them three-dimensional. And so the stripes all went out, the petals. And so each petal did that. And that was actually kind of cool. And I overlapped one side so that they kind of spun out. And then put a poofy center in the middle of all the flowers in the flower box that Zuki was going to look at. So I never would have thought of the three-dimensional thing. And I have used that so many times. But the thought came to me with, how am I going to use this fabric? And I kind of crumpled it up, and I was trying to figure out, did I want to pleat it? You know, how did I want to use it? And then I was just thinking, well, that's not so bad. You know, maybe I could do something like this. And it worked out really, really well. So I took on a challenge with a fabric that I didn't like, and I actually made something that I did like. And I have used that same petal technique for name tags and other quilts, and I probably used it 100 times since then. So go ahead, stretch. I want you to. But even if you're doing it, there are things you can do that makes it less stressful while you're trying something new. So one of the things that I want to talk about in terms of keeping your stress down while still challenging yourself with something new is to think in advance. What do you need? When do you need it? And how do you want to store it before you even start? It's not uncommon when I go into somebody's home that they'll have a project box. And we can pretend that this is a project box for me, really. So they'll have a project box like this, okay? In this case, this is from my hexagon quilts. And they just grab a box that'll fit what they have right now. And what winds up happening is you have this box, and then you start running out of room, and then you need another box, and then another box, and then the first box gets misplaced and you can't find it. And so as you go along, you find yourself having a harder and harder time being able to put all your pieces together because they've gotten scattered. So if I purchase fabric for a quilt, let's say I'm making a specific quilt by a specific pattern, which I almost never do, as you know, because I tweak them all, but let's play pretend. Then what you do is you take that fabric, and without scrunching it down as flat as it'll go, you take that fabric and you put it in the container that you want to use for your project. And in there you include the book, you include some spools of thread. Even if they're not the right thread, grab a bigger spool like this. Grab a cone even. Does everything fit? If you're going to be doing paper piecing, and you know that you're going to be making 100 pages, put the paper in the box. Make sure everything's going to fit so that you have one box for this project. It will make your life so much easier. Now, as you go along, you may find you don't need as big a box for your project.
because you've cut out so much fabric. You're not using any of this stuff anymore, or whatever. You can always downsize the box, but as long as everything still fits. Okay? So my boxes tend to have extra room in them because I do buy extra fabric, because I tend to make alterations to the plan. I want to have that extra room, and I want the extra material in case I decide to cut something differently, or I want to use a different technique. So as an example, square in a square. Do I have one handy? No. I hope you all know what the square in a square block looks like, because you've got your square in the middle, and then it's set inside another square. For some patterns, they have you using triangles and cutting them and then sewing the triangles together, right? So you've got your square in the middle and you sew the triangle onto the square. That uses a lot less fabric than what I like to do, because I like to sew on a square so that I have the extra material there. That's actually a bad example. The square in a square. I'm sorry. Let's switch that to a snowball. A snowball is a better example. A snowball is where you start with... Hold on, let me do it this way. Yeah. Okay. You start with a square of fabric like this. Okay? Let me get a little closer. There we go, that's better. Okay? And some patterns will have you cut here and here, like this. And then you take your triangle and you put it in this place, and then you sew them together. And then you wind up with the snowball design. So let's say this was dark. I mean, this is light and these were dark, because these are your triangles. I like to do the flip and fold, whereas this corner I would leave the square corner in place. I would put another square here. Excuse me. And then I would stitch. Then this piece will ultimately fold down to make this corner. But I'll also stitch the 1/2 inch away here. And when I cut this, this becomes a 1/2 square triangle that's already sewn. As you know, I like to pre-sew 1/2 square triangles this way so that they're ready when I'm ready to do them. And I'm not sewing biases together, which tends to get stretchy, which tends to make a quilt not lie as flat. Remember we said flat all the way through. So when I'm looking at the pattern, they're going to say to sew, to cut these triangles and sew them on. And I would prefer not to do that, so I will buy the extra material so I can sew this way. Now sometimes the methods that I use might save material over their method, and sometimes it will cost me material. So I like to make sure that I'm covered. Now, other than that, hold on, let me put this away, because that's the goal, right? Keep everything away. It's not really away, it's just over to the side. So, if you're starting something new, go ahead, put all that stuff in the box. Also put in the box a list of websites, or the website if there's one particular person whose technique you're trying, where that information can be found, or where you can send an email if you're stuck. Most instructors are more than happy to help you master their technique. So, especially if you've taken the class, if you take an online class or you take an in-person class, if you call or you email or you whatever form of communication they want, if you reach out to that instructor and say, okay, I was doing this and I did step 1, 2, and 3. Here's some photos, right? I did step 1, 2, and 3, and now I'm stuck because I don't really understand how these things go together. I've checked your website and I can't find it there. Can you explain it to me? Almost every teacher that I know will happily do so. Okay? For a couple reasons. The first one is nobody teaches hoping people fail at what they're trying to teach. Okay? So we want you to be successful. And there's a couple reasons for that. If I'm not a good enough teacher, then it's going to build resentment in you if I don't help you, and you're not going to refer me to other places, right? And we are a word of mouth kind of industry as instructors in quilting. So that's the mercenary reason, as well as just the whole we want everybody to be successful. Keeping all of that in mind, if you have all that contact information in your package, everything fits, then when you're working on it, I always keep a notebook too, one like this, right? So if I've got questions, or I did something, or if there was a mistake in the pattern, or if I really liked it when I did this, I can keep all my notes in there as well. So when I'm finding my box, one of these goes in the box too. Okay? Now, they get recycled all the time. Okay? There's not a whole brand new notebook for every project, because I don't have that many projects I'm actively working on. Now, that is not to say that if I look up there, that I won't see a quilt that I started, I think, 27 or 28 years ago. I totally lost steam on it. And to be honest with you, it's just in an inaccessible spot because I know I'm not going to work on it right now. And I may never, at which point I'm going to get my step stool out and I'll probably do that. I try to do a quick go over every year or so, usually in the summer. And I'll go through and I'll look and I'll see, and it's probably going to just go away. It's going to hit the free table. Because it was a Burgoyne surrounded, and I was still a new quilter, so I wasn't as good at it as I would like. What I may also do, it's a purple and white quilt, I may just say, okay, I'm not making the Burgoyne surrounded, but what pieces have I gotten sewn and what can I do with those? So it may be a situation where I've got this basket up there and it holds everything I need, but I may wind up having that ready to recycle. Since I do work on a bunch of stuff at the same time, I do have multiple baskets. I got a bunch of them when I was in the Bahamas and on vacation. And I said, you know what, these would be perfect. They're these little rectangular satchels almost, out of straw. And then the tops curl over, and then there's a straw button that you just put the loop over. And so and they're all slightly different on the ends, so I can see that they're different projects, and then I've got the labels. So that's something. I've got probably 6 of those. I have a couple of big straw baskets with lids that come over. And then I've got a couple of other baskets up there. Y baskets. I have found that plastic bins for project storage, especially if it's going to be years, which sometimes it's just going to be years, okay? I don't like that because I'm here in Virginia, and it can get really humid here. And so I don't want to take any chance on any condensation inside the box, potentially causing mold or rot. A straw basket will keep them clean because there's a fabric lining, so it stays clean but it still breathes. And so I don't have any of that degradation happening inside the bins. Even these drawers that I keep the fabric squares and strips and stuff in, it's not an airtight seal in the little drawer units, so they get some air circulation as well. Plus they're getting open and closed a lot. But the plastic totes with the really tight lids can be a real problem to the material that's inside over time. Um, because if you're having a really humid day when you pack the stuff away in the middle of the winter when it gets cold, you get condensation on the inside of the box, and that becomes a problem. So I don't tend to use bins for that. In the past, when I have, what I would do is I would take a little drill and up at the top, just below the lip of the box. So, as an example, we'll pretend that this is a box. Like right along here, I would take a thin drill and just drill a series of holes all the way around to give just that little bit of ventilation to the box so that any moisture could evaporate. Now, does this mean that humidity gets into the box too? Yes, but it's not staying there. The problem is when the humidity gets in there and it stays, that's when you start to build up mold and you get the condensation later. So, just as a thought, that's another way to store your project stuff. If you want to go with plastic, just a thin drill bit and, just in out. And I would put them, I think I was doing about an inch apart, but of course it's whatever you're comfortable with. So mine are in baskets. I do have one of those big rolling carts. You can't see my hand. Okay. One of those big tall rolling carts. It's like 4 feet tall. I think it's like an IKEA kind of cart. And that has the baskets as well. Some of those are wire and some of those are plastic. But again, they're not airtight. They just move in and out. And those are for the projects that don't fit in the baskets that I have, or oversized squares. I'm thinking of doing something that I saw on Just Get It Done Quilts, one of her StashBlaster Quilts. Is an improvisational. You cut your stack and then you take the one on the top, you put it on the bottom and you sew it. Then you cut this way and then you take the top two and you put it at the bottom and you sew them. The idea being that you wind up with this multi-patch random set of blocks and then you put them all together. It's a really fast way to do things. And I don't tend to work in that 14-inch size, which is what I think they are. So something like that would go into those big baskets in the slider rack. But again, I try not to have too many going at a time. I usually have maybe 6 major projects and then some little things like a mug rug or a small centerpiece quilt. Something that might just go under a vase. I do a lot of them that are maybe 16 inches. So instead of a table runner, and it's not really the same size as a lot of table toppers. It's just a little bitty one, because if you put a bowl of flowers or a vase, it's a nice little accent. I do those a lot as like hostess gifts and that kind of thing, because you can make a whole bunch of them all at once in different colors, and then you find out what somebody's favorite color is, and that's the one you take with you, kind of a thing. So anyway, that's kind of my cleanup day today. We will be working again on our Twisted 4 patch next time, and hopefully things are going well for you on that. If you've got any questions, please feel free to email me at mail@stashblasterquilts.com. You can leave a comment in the comments section, and please, if you've enjoyed today, like, subscribe, hit the bell if you want to know when I'm doing this again. The live stream is every first and third Wednesday of the month. I am going to get to the editing, I promise. I'm just not sure when. Things have to slow down a little bit first. I'm still working on the second edition of my book, and that is taking way too long. And so that's the book on hoarding that we've talked about before. And then I can start working on the other things I'm doing. And then once that's all settled and that's done, then I'll have a little bit more time. Plus, bad stress for me is that the website is still not up. and I don't think it's going to be up until the taxes are done. So we're looking probably the end of April. I apologize because all the patterns are there. There's all kinds of stuff there. But this is something that Scott's going to have to take a big chunk of time to get in on and yell at people and have other people do their jobs, which they don't seem to want to do, in order to get it to work. So I have some bad stress too, which is why I do the good stressy things, which is the quilting. So thank you for coming today or whenever it is that you see this. I will see you again first and third Wednesday of every month at 7 o'clock. Have a great time, and let's go get some sewing done, okay?